Hi guys, it's Debbie, and that time of the year has finally come. It is the moment to look back at what the world of cinema has given us this year and what I personally consider some of the best films of 2018. This video is the first of two parts, the second covering what I consider the worst films of 2018, so make sure to check that out. It will be linked in the description box below. As every year, please remember that it is impossible for me to see every film in time, and that means that some big names I still haven't been able to see are, for example, Mary Poppins, A Star is Born, Widows. The first film I'd like to speak about today is Hereditary, starring Toni Collette. Hereditary is what I could easily describe as one of the best horror films of the decade. So please forgive me while I try to introduce the plot without revealing anything, basically. Because the subtle genius of the creators of this film, of the director, of the production company A24, carried out the project in a manner which did not reveal anything more than the strict minimum, anything bare necessary before the actual viewing of this film. This defied all the expectations of moviegoers who, after years of predictable trailers and then easily guessable plots, especially for horror films, had already laid out their ideas regarding the story and were definitely not expecting what they eventually got to see. The story introduces us to a family who is struggling with a series of issues, including the loss of a grandmother, lack of communication, issues with parenthood. This situation then collapses after a series of very upsetting and creepy events, which I will not go into because, trust me, any information could ruin your viewing of this film. Besides the fantastically terrifying plot, another winning feature in Hereditary was the acting. Toni Collette in particular was incredible with emotions. The big problem with horror films is that pain, especially emotional pain, is displayed as something cold, distant from us. We often see characters suffering, crying, screaming, but it never really touches us. Instead, in Hereditary, Toni Collette displayed emotions in such a raw, visceral way. It was nearly instinctive, animalistic, that we could not help just be dragged into the plot. The second film on the list is Klansman, directed by Spike Lee. Klansman is the story of a police officer who, back in the 70s, was able to infiltrate the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, the world's most infamous white supremacy group. The point of the story is that the officer looked like this, understandably creating a very interesting and dynamic storyline, which offered a ton of food for thought, but in a very engaging manner. Klansman is a fantastic film. It stars Adam Driver, who is quickly becoming one of my favourite actors to watch at the moment, John David Washington, who portrays Ron Stallworth, and who I'd never seen on screen, but who was an incredible surprise. I can't wait to see more of him. I think both Driver and Washington have that gift of being incredibly natural on set, something which definitely delivers that extra layer of authenticity. In general, I must say I loved how all the characters were shown on the screen with all their flawed and detailed personalities, how the KKK characters were introduced, Patrice's character, who was an activist for a Black Power movement. The plot is very clever and it manages to engage the audience as it is set in the 70s but covers topics which are somehow relevant today, the never-ending problem with racism, but without skipping many moments of comedic relief which kept the audience's attention right until the end. The third film on my list is Annihilation, directed by Alex Garland, who you may know as the director of films such as Ex Machina, 28 Days Later, and even for writing the book The Beach, which then became a huge success, starring a very young Leonardo DiCaprio. Annihilation is a visually stunning science fiction story of a group of scientists who are studying a phenomenon that suddenly and mysteriously formed and which they decided to rename the Shimmer, a mysterious wall of energy from which nobody has ever returned. So the film focuses on what is going on beyond the Shimmer, the odd events that occur beyond it, the mutations that happen, the energy that it is spreading, and then of course all the psychological consequences of it, and the moral questions that arise in light of all of this. As a matter of fact, what I loved about Annihilation is that it is a scientific adventure under a disturbing perspective, which makes us question many things. This film has been considered by some too weird, odd, but that's exactly what I loved about it. And I think that as humans in the 21st century, who are used to just have science ready to explain anything, one of the scariest things is an event which defies the laws of science. Imagine how creepy and ghastly that might sound. This was a concept already introduced with films such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, in which the tension was built upon a fact which defied everything humans had ever known about themselves. On a happier note, the fourth film I'd like to speak about today is Isle of Dogs, directed by Wes Anderson. Isle of Dogs is a stop-motion film which tells the story of a dystopian Japan in which an authoritarian regime has decided to banish all dogs to the so-called Trash Island, where they live isolated, scavenging for food, until one day a child manages to reach the island looking for his own pet dog, Spots. He creates a very unlikely search party with some of the dogs, which then develops into a much larger adventure. This film is one of the most intensely curated films I have seen in the last years. In addition to a meticulous stop-motion animation, all the dogs are given their own very specific personality traits, and this makes us relate to them on a nearly human level. There are also some very distinctive Wes Anderson filming techniques. He is known for being particularly interested in the composition of the image that you're watching, and the plot engages everybody, as in some points it's rather dramatic but also so heartwarming and comedic. Now for the fifth and last film on this list, the choice was very hard. There was First Man, about the moon landing. It was beautiful, it made us feel tiny in this world. I watched Bird Box on Netflix just a few days ago. I kept on thinking of that primal, instinctive horror that it delivered, the fear of death itself. Then I was searching the story of a father's desperate attempt to find his daughter who disappeared, but all set within technological devices. I wish I could have included Molly's Game, which was inconveniently released just at the end of 2017, and in the end I got to see it in July of this year. But the final choice went for A Quiet Place, directed by John Krasinski, who also stars in the film alongside Emily Blunt as husband and wife in a nightmarish reality in which a gruesome death awaits you if you make any noise. Many films have been taken on this path lately. Don't Breathe was set in an environment in which the characters had to be very quiet and they could barely see. Bird Box I was quoting earlier, also a horror film in which the characters must not open their eyes, must not see. And up until now, these three films did not let me down. I just hope this doesn't become a trend which would then ruin the concept. I decided to include A Quiet Place today because it is not just a simple horror film in which the characters have to be quiet. It builds up a very intense and deep background to the story. We get to know the characters even without them speaking or making any noise. There is some wonderful acting based on the way characters look at each other, the way they interact with their mannerisms, their body movements. We can tell if there is love and pride, if they are let down. Usually horror films just tend to skip over anything that's not strictly horror related, whereas A Quiet Place allowed the right time to get to know the characters, and then the tension just came in and it ruined everything. That was the real horror of it, to make a nearly unbearable, terrifying situation. So these were my top 5 films of the year. There were many others that I really enjoyed. Some of them I have quoted. So let me know what are your favourite films of 2018 with a comment down below. Make sure to check out the second video about the worst films of 2018. That's also linked down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you soon. Bye.